Hi, Anne, again. And good job, Laurel. So I'm just going to talk like Laurel said about, I think probably have to step a little way back here just to make sure I'm in the screen. There's a lot of reflection coming from there. That's why I have to move around a little bit. Okay, so probably going to take about 15 minutes. I just want to go over some of the basic things. You probably know a little bit about it already. Um, so I'm going to come at it from a slightly different angle. My name, as as was presented earlier, my name is Dr. David Ejibade. I'm actually from Nigeria, Africa, and I run a foundation called the Brain and Body Foundation. And our goal is really, as the name implies, is to address brain conditions. We started with children, but we've kind of like transitioned to adults now because it's basically the same principles. Whatever affects the brain can be addressed. We don't have access to all the MRI scans, the lab tests, and the things that everybody here takes for granted. We have to start with the basic principles, the root causes, so to speak, but without the tests to really prove that these are the root causes. So we rely a lot on what the data says, how things are being treated here, and then we kind of apply them to our remote areas in Africa and see how best we can work with them. So we don't use medications at all because obviously if you're going to use a medication, you have to have the wherewithal to test and make sure you're not going to toxic levels. And so we don't even deal with that at all for that purpose. Is we deal specifically with nutrients that have been considered safe and have been tested extensively by different centers and different institutions. So we're going to talk about memory problems because that's what kind of like defines Alzheimer's disease. But it's not just about memory at all. And I have a problem with all these memory centers because the truth is, memory is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. So we're going to talk about what that Alzheimer's disease really is. We're going to talk about some causes, and we're going to talk about our unique approach to addressing dementia. Like I said, we started dealing with kids with cerebral palsy, autism, and so on and so forth. And we got so much success back home that the federal government decided to give us permission to actually use our unique approach to doing it. And I don't think there's any other organization that's doing it the way we're doing it. But they saw the results, and you can't deny results. And so when we started getting more and more successful with kids, we started having adults coming to us, maybe kids bringing their adult parents who had strokes or dementias or epilepsy or whatever brain condition. And we basically applied the same principles that we had applied with children to the adults. And I think that was a good way to go because we found out that whatever was safe with kids, if something is safe and effective with kids, you can be sure it's going to be safe and effective with adults for the most part. And so we basically applied the same principles. Obviously, we needed to have higher doses, but lo and behold, we started getting even really good results, even with adults with dementia and strokes and other things as well. And so we basically kept on working on it. And I would come to the US and go back and forth a lot to keep updated on what was going on here. It was during one of those times I got stuck here because of COVID. So I've been here now for about a year and a half now, all because of COVID. So thank you, COVID. All right. So there are three things when a person begins to have memory issues that are of concern. Now we all have slight slips here and there, but when it becomes a concern, it's one of three things. It could just be normal aging. It could be what is known as MCI, mild cognitive impairment, which is kind of like a midway house between normal aging and, of course, dementia or Alzheimer's disease. The question is, which of them is it? And I kind of like showed, we're not going to go through much of these slides, but the difference between normal aging and Alzheimer's disease has to do with frequency or the memory as a result of Alzheimer's disease. Let me put it that way. A lot of it has to do with consistency and frequency of the problem. Normal aging, you forgot, it comes back to you after 2 minutes, after 5 minutes, after thinking really hard. With Alzheimer's disease, that probably doesn't come back. And sometimes you don't realize you have a problem, especially in the earlier stages. You just don't realize you have a problem and you just keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. If nothing is done, this is the data. After 1 year, it becomes, for 10% of them, it progresses to Alzheimer's disease. For 35 to 40%, within 5 years, it progresses to dementia. Some will improve spontaneously. Some people just have maybe a vitamin B12 deficiency. Some people, maybe they're just going through a grief period or a stressful period. It passed, and memory is back to what it was before. For others, it's basically the same. That's just your lot in life. You just kind of like that's you probably always have a problem with faces or words or names, and it gets worse, but it's still considered normal. So we're concerned about, obviously, number one, we're concerned about those who progress to dementia. You really, am I speaking too fast? You hear me? Okay, good. Sometimes I get carried away. All right. So the only way you can know for sure which of them it is, because they all pretty much appear the same, right? In the initial stages. Like I said, over here in the U.S., you've got access to all these things. So they do. The psychologist comes, gives you tests you. The psychiatrist, the neurologist, maybe even the neurosurgeon. They all can look at you, poke you, prod you in several different places. And at the end of the day, when they think or they feel that it is Alzheimer's disease, maybe they look at your brain. They see some brain shrinkage. They see that you've got amyloid plaques, tau tangles, which are considered the signatures. Uh, the word in medicine is called pathognomonic of Alzheimer's disease. When you have those plaques and the tangles, they say you've got Alzheimer's disease, and of course a treatment protocol is instituted. Most of it comes under two main kinds. Uh, Aricept, which you probably know about. Are you familiar with that? And then memantine. Memantine, the second one, is for the more severe forms of the disease. So most people start with Aricept and sometimes stay with Aricept. Doctors and pharmacists will all tell you that for the most part that hasn't really worked. 99% of all the drugs that they've studied, unfortunately, do not really produce good results, and have not. They still haven't cracked the code when it comes to Alzheimer's disease. And Laurel alluded to that because they're just looking at one hole. They're looking to plug one hole out of 36. Now I hear there are how many now? 40. Keep adding to that. You're still supposed to send me that. Send me that list though. Oh wow. Okay. There we go. Yeah, of the holes, because he mentioned 36. I've looked everywhere for that list of 36. So there isn't one. Okay, it's not just me. All right, so I'm just going to skip through this. So the drug that they've finally come out with, I understand there was a lot of controversy at the FDA before this drug was approved, and even at that, it's a very expensive drug, 56,000. It has severe complications. So even at the cost, even if you can afford it, it's still a problem. So that isn't an option. Certainly isn't an option for Nigeria and other West African countries or other third world countries. That's $56,000 more than anybody can afford, quite frankly. And we don't have insurance too. So we were forced, as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. We were forced to think really hard about how to address it. This is just another thing. Alzheimer's disease is the one disease of the top 10 that cannot be delayed. I mean, it really sounds like this irresistible force, that this big bad wolf that cannot be conquered, it cannot be delayed. It's going to huff and puff and blow your house down no matter what you do. And we've thrown billions and billions and billions of dollars at it. But have we been going at it from the wrong angle? And I think to answer that question, we should start with the basics. First and foremost, the definition of Alzheimer's disease. Let's start with that. It's not just as a result of plaques or tangles or a toxin or an immune deficiency or inflammation. What is happening with Alzheimer's disease is that your brain itself is turning against you. It is shutting itself down. It's almost as if a kill switch had been flipped. And there's a program, a self-suicide, a self-suicide, that's like an oxymoron, isn't it? A self-destruct program has been initiated, and that the brain is methodically, it's cold-bloodedly, single-mindedly, faithfully executing over a period of time. I'll say it again. It's as if the brain has decided at a certain point to switch itself off, and it's doing that in a sequence of predetermined steps that over time leads to the eventual death of the patient. So unlike cancer, unlike the other kinds of dementia, unlike strokes, it's not like some external thing is happening to you. The brain this time is the one doing it to you. And I think that has to be understood because it gives you a clearer picture as to why these drugs and these other therapies are not working as they should. Because you're fighting against your brain. And we all know the brain is the most complex, the most complicated piece of bioelectrical machinery in the known universe. You cannot hope to win. The only way you can turn that back is to sort of coax, cajole, coerce, and probably even convince the brain to reverse course and to switch back on as opposed to shutting itself down. So we're going to be talking about that some more. But again, let's look at the basics. That's the brain. The most basic parts of the whole brain, how the brain works, is by a nerve cell called a neuron, passing information via signals. This is known as the synaptic cleft or the synapse. This whole thing is called a synapse. A synapse is made up of two neurons working together. I kind of look at it as the basic family unit. So you think about it, the basic family unit, the basic unit of the nation or of a community is the family units, the mother and the father and the children. So the synapse is really what makes the brain work. This has to happen. This communication has to happen. If you're thinking, if you're throwing a ball, if you're sitting down, if you're writing the way you are, and whatever you're doing, this process has to happen in the brain. Obviously, it's a lot more complicated. There are several billions of this happening, but that's what happens. The brain has a network by which it works. Again, this is the basic parts, and this is the network I'm talking about. So these are all neurons, all connecting. Some single neurons can have as many as 40,000 neurons they're connecting with, all for different purposes: memory, function, sleep, whatever it is. Again, that's the brain, and of course, that's the neuron. So what happens with Alzheimer's disease is that the brain is shutting down those connections. That's really what's happening. And once it's shutting down the connections, the neurons are dying as well. Because the whole purpose for the neuron is to have connections. You can also relate that to life. The whole purpose of life is for you to be connected, to her, to live. Man was never meant, or mankind was never meant to live in solitude. We tend to die in some way or the form or fashion if we're not connected. And they say that those who tend to be single for a long time in life tend not to live as long as people who are married. And just one example. Doesn't happen, doesn't work in every case, but it is one of the things that they look at. It's so important that for well-being, you need to have connections. You need to have connections. Okay, so, and this is the end goal and end problem. The brain begins to shut itself down and eventually shrinks to about 2/3 or less of its original size. What triggers this program? Well, as we said, as Laura said, it's about over 36 different things. But the point is this: a lot of things happening at once over a period of time. This movie just came out recently. Have you seen it? Okay, you're not a movie goer, are you? Is it on Netflix? I mean, it's. Oh, really? Gosh, I have. I haven't seen it yet, but it really seemed. I saw the preview and I was like, I mean, this just jumped at me. And when I thought about Alzheimer's disease, I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good title for that, because over a period of time, whether it's chronic depression, maybe you've had a stroke, someone has had a stroke before, maybe someone has had diabetes. That's a big one, really big one. People who have diabetes have a greater incidence of dementia. Even those in the military, we're finding out that people in the military tend to have higher risk of dementia. Black people, tend to have higher risks of dementia. And of course, women, some say as much as 3 times more likely than men to have dementia. We won't go into all that right now. I'm working on a series on that. But and there are reasons why. So we have some like a few more photos of movies. Did you see this Concussion with Will Smith? No. Okay. This was about it's a true story about a Nigerian doctor, by the way. So he acted as a Nigerian doctor, which I thought he'd made a he he messed our accent up completely. They went to get somebody from East Africa, someone's accent from East Africa, and I'm like, this guy is being paid millions of dollars. These movies are big budgets. Was it too much to find a Nigerian and copy the Nigerian's accent? I don't get it. I was so upset when I heard him speak in the movie. I was like, this is not Nigerian. Anyway, so it's about the footballers. I mean, for after years and years of denial by the NFL, they came to realize that they can't, because of what he did. He began to demonstrate in autopsies that there was significant damage to their brains, which was causing many of their emotional psychiatric problems. Many of them are getting suicidal, angry, very fluid emotional outbursts and all that. And he's the one who pointed that out. And the term is called CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So big word. But basically, he coined it out, and that was a Nigerian doctor. And of course, I talked about the military. If you're in the military a lot, I mean, obviously they are high at risk. Gunshots, Agent Orange, the stress, and all that, and so on and so forth. I mentioned diabetes. These are some obviously other chronic diseases too can predispose. So again, it's not one thing. It's a series of things. And with the Recode, and I really encourage you to get the book, they're finding out all the different things, and they're finding out what you can do to counteract all those different things. Although obviously some people are more prone due to their circumstances than others. Do you think you know what could have caused your dad's? Uh-huh. Anybody in his family? His mom died from dementia. How did you know her? You did. Okay. Okay. How old is your dad now? 83. Okay. So yeah, I mean, so obviously the genetic components could be part of it as well. Sometimes we don't know what it is, but obviously if you go in and you do the necessary tests, there might be some clues come out. So I call this the dirty dozen, and they all start with the letter I, and I probably won't go into them much right now. But what we know too, and this is where I come in a lot, because since we can't deal with a lot of them, one of some of the things we can deal with are with the insufficiencies. For instance, we know that in most cases the brain needs nutrients, needs specific nutrients, and so we can supply those nutrients. It can go a long way towards improving brain function. All right, so this is just okay. Let's go back. Oh, I don't know how to do that though. Okay. Okay. So which one did you miss? Inactivity. I would have had to go through. I was writing them down this afternoon, and I was like, "Gosh, I got to 10, and I was like, Dead gummit, where's it? I'm supposed to know all this." So somehow all the 40 kind of like, from what I've seen, kind of they kind of fit this. So I just figured it's easier to remember 12 than it is to remember 40. So at a certain point, the brain just switches off and decides, I'm done. So obviously, I mean, each of these things I mentioned earlier can cause problems. But it seems like, again, there's a point in which the brain decides to be the actual enemy doing the work. And the question I have, probably if I ever get to meet Dr. Bredesen, is okay, the brain decides to switch off. Okay, it's a very complex, smart organ. So why doesn't it realize when to stop, right? I mean, it knows when to start pruning back after the danger has passed. Why shouldn't it know to stop killing itself at a certain point? Because that's really what's happening here. It's not stopping. It just keeps pruning back and pruning back and pruning back until the vital organs, if the person lives that long, until the vital organs are destroyed by the brain. I don't get. 80% of people on the full protocol got better. They got better. And about 10% got worse, and they don't know why. They're still trying to figure it out. That's still a heck of a good. But 80%. That's a heck. That's nothing else has done that. Yeah, nothing comes close. And the earlier you intervene, the better. Yep. Ideally, before symptoms even appear, because they know that brain changes occur 15 to 30 years before symptoms. Decades, yeah. So the damage, yeah. So yeah, that's a heck of a record, I gotta say. So, like I was saying, I grew up in the '70s, so this is the real Incredible Hulk that we learned. You probably know what's going to happen after this, right? And and there he is. So, what we want to do is I want to stop his eyes from going green, sort of speak, talking your brain off the ledge, stopping it from persisting in this mad suicide rush. Again, the same principle. The solution to the problem is the same, just reversing the problem. So if there are so many things that cause the problem, you've again, just not to belabor the point, but you've got to address this from several different angles. Okay, so Dr. Bredesen and his Recode protocol, if you're fortunate enough for your father to be involved in that protocol, that would be great. Again, because we don't have that kind of access back in my country and other countries like that, we have to deal with the most basic things. So there are 7 areas that we address. So basically, the way we see it is that the brain has its own needs. If the brain is faltering, if the brain is fumbling, we have to understand what are the things that support and make the brain work. What are the circumstances? What's the environment? What is it that makes the brain work the way it should? Then focus on providing the brain with those things and then standing back and watching it respond, if at all. And I have the 7 areas that we talk about here. So I'm going to explain to you why these are important. There are about 12, 13 systems in the body: the cardiovascular system, the musculoskeletal system, the digestive system, and so on and so forth. There. How far have you gone? How much time? You done? Well, you write fast, Anne. You're good. You are. Are you a teacher? Or were you a teacher? You see, that's it. Okay. Okay, so obviously we're dealing with the brain here. So it needs all the help it can get, like I said. Now, the brain, let's assume this is the brain here. This is a part of the brain that controls the rest. The brain gets impulses. Yep. Yep. So the brain gets feedback from the hormones, estrogen, and so on and so forth. It also gets feedback from the immune system. These 3 I call the central governing system, and they control all the other systems in the body. So for the brain to work, it must get support from the endocrine system and the immune system. So it's a continuous loop and feedback. For this, so we have to support each of these. All right, that's the endocrine system. That's the immune system. And we use a lot of what are known as nutraceuticals. Have you heard of that before? Okay, so nutraceuticals to strengthen the immune system, nutraceuticals to strengthen the endocrine system. And of course, there's no way those nutrients are going to get to the immune system, the brain, or the endocrine system if it doesn't go through the gut. So the brain needs nutrients for it to repair itself. The human body heals itself. You can also say the human brain heals itself. and proper nutrition provides it with the resources it requires to accomplish that task. And so the gut, the digestive system, is the way through which the nutrients gets into the body, right? If the digestive system needs to be empowered and strengthened as well. But it's not just about digestion. We're finding out that right here in the colon, the final part of the, let me stay tuned, not come too close. The final part of the digestive system is known as, it has what is known as the microbiome. It has the bugs, the whole collection of the good bugs and the bad bugs. Interestingly enough, that collection of microbiome is the same mass as the brain. So it's about I think it's about 3 pounds or something. About 3 pounds. The brain is about 3 pounds as well. I think. I get it. Anyway, it's about the total mass of the bacteria in the gut is the same as the mass of the brain. Interestingly enough, and we know that the bacteria exert a tremendous amount of influence on the brain. Tremendous amount of influence. I discovered that when we started treating kids with autism and the kids with Down syndrome. We found out that simply in Down syndrome was the most dramatic. All we would give them are the probiotics, Down syndrome, and where they weren't able to speak before, or where they were peeing on themselves or doing all kinds of crazy stuff, they would switch just like that based on giving them probiotics. So the influence of the gut on the brain is absolutely remarkable, and it is a tragedy, in my opinion, that people that deal with the brain, neurologists, psychiatrists, even psychologists, are not taking this into cognizance, because it plays such a tremendous role in the whole brain-body connection. So the gut is very important, and also the mouth, the teeth. We now know that there are certain mouth infections that can lead to brain problems. Uh, okay. So, and then there's another part too. You also want to consider that you're thinking about the cells themselves. So these are neurons. These neurons and these cells, they need energy, they need nourishment themselves. So yes, we've talked about the nervous system as a whole, and the digestive system, and the endocrine system, and the immune system. But the brain cells themselves have their needs, and you also need to think about addressing them as well. And so here are some of the most basic nutrients that we have found are super important for brain health. Omega 3s, obviously omega 3s. If you take all the liquid out of the brain, if just the pure dry weight of the brain, 60% of that is made up of fatty acids. The brain is a lot of fat, and a very large percentage of the fat in the brain is made up of the omega-3 fatty acids. There are different kinds, but omega-3s carry the lion's share. Very, very important. And that's one of the differences between human milk and cow milk. Human milk has so much more of the omega-3s than cow milk does. Okay, human milk also has a lot more of the fiber, undigestible fiber, and that's the baby needs to feed its good, or his or her good bacteria. Last one here, the coconut oil. I don't know if you've heard about coconut oil for the brain. And cook.
I know that it's used for lots of different purposes, but I hadn't heard about the brain. But it makes sense. It's an oil. Yeah.
So coconut oil, good. Coconut oil is a part of it contains what are known as medium chain triglycerides, which the brain seems to prefer. You've heard about ketones. Ketones are also some form of medium chain ketogenic diet. So those ketones are some form of the brain prefers ketones to glucose. If you were to give the brain the choice between the two, it would take the ketones every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Prefers that. Unfortunately, most of us don't get to that stage where our diets present the brain with ketones. So what this lady did, she said, both her and her husband are doctors. Her name is Mary Newport. This is a book you might want to get. Um, they're both doctors.
David, just a heads up, we have to be out of here in 5 minutes.
Oh, oh wow. Okay. Okay.
They might be nice to us. I think they don't close until 8, but they told me that they sort of wrap things up.
This time. Okay, got it.
Maybe because it's a small group. Yeah.
Okay, all right, I'll just move on. All right, but you need vitamin D too, vitamin C, and then I can send you the slides too. If you, okay, it's not all about nutrition, and the last but not the least, the cardiovascular system. You've once the food gets into the digestive system and is digested, it gets into the body. The blood vessels have to take it to the brain. Same thing with oxygen. Same thing with everything else that the brain needs. Without the cardiovascular system working well, it's not going to get the nutrients to the brain. And so we have to support the cardiovascular system. That's another big mistake I see with neurologists when they're treating this disease. Most of the problems, even with dementia, they see that in most cases, it's not just the tau, it's not just the plaques, it's the fact that there are vascular changes in the brain that make them eventually succumb to dementia. So you got to support the cardiovascular system as well, and we use nutraceuticals for that. So Alzheimer's disease is not just about memory; it's about a whole lot of other things. It's about your brain turning on itself. Final words. Just want to say movement. Of all the things that they've seen, of all the things that they've looked at as prevention for dementia, they found the one thing that sticks out even more than nutrition from the I'm talking about from research studies now is the fact is the thing about movement. In fact, they say that the brain, the reason that we have such a large brain is because it's more for movement than it is for thinking. I still find that hard to believe, but that's what they say. Okay, all right. So that's our information there, just in case you want to grab it. Sorry, it took a lot more time than I thought we were going to do. So
That's okay. So, I mean, what I was going to touch on is that all the things that you mentioned,
yeah.
nutrition and cardiovascular health, and exercise, and gut health, and that all works best when we can relax.
Hmm. Very
So
true.
there, we have the sympathetic nervous system, the fight, flight, freeze, faint, and we have the parasympathetic nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
where we rest and digest and heal and detoxify. And our modern lifestyle is fast and busy and stressful. And if we can take some time to breathe and relax, our body kicks into the healing and detoxifying mode. So we don't have to do, a 60-minute yoga class to get into that space. We can do that